people that, you work with that are slowing their aging down by, a third. I'm curious, like how much of that is related to lifestyle versus their genetics? Like, are these just people that have awesome genes?
Studies have found that genetics accounts for anywhere between 10 and 30% of our lifespan and health span, our longevity. That 73% of the participants aged 39 to 76, half male, half female, we were able to slow down their pace of aging by a significant amount, on average by 1 month per year.
Chris, thank you so much for being here today.
Of course. Thanks for having me, Amber.
Yeah, I was just telling you, my listeners know, like I get so amped up for these conversations because I am so just loving where the research and science is going now with like so many like biohacking and aging and our anti-aging and longevity and just all of the things. And so when I really started diving into what you guys are doing at Novos, I was like, I was like, I can't wait to talk about all of this. I really actually just want to, because I know there's going to be a lot of, stuff that we cover today, but I want to just like kind of dive in and like just set the stage for the listeners of really clarifying what is the difference between anti-aging and longevity. I think it's such an important thing to clarify, because I'll be honest, I think most people think it's the same.
Yeah, most people probably do think it's the same, though if you ask someone in the field of longevity if anti-aging is the same, they will adamantly argue that they are vastly different, especially the scientists in the longevity field. So anti-aging is a field that has been around for decades, and it's typically really just focused on masking the signs of aging. So that might be, for example, you get a skin cream that moisturizes your skin and it makes your skin look a little bit younger. It might like plump up some of the wrinkles very slightly, but it's a very temporary effect. And you wash that skin cream off and then you're back to normal again. So it's just really just trying to hide the signs. And then in other cases, anti-aging is applied to things like antioxidants, saying that antioxidants are anti-aging. But this is based on an outdated theory of aging called the free radical theory of aging, which was very popular in the 1980s and 90s. It was the thought that free radicals, these oxidative species that can accumulate in our bodies from things that cause damage, for example, UV radiation and different types of foods we eat, or cigarette smoke and pollution and so on, that they were actually damaging cells and by extension DNA, and that is why we aged. But it's since been shown that it's far more complex than that, and we can talk more about the hallmarks of aging, but this is only one of a dozen hallmarks of aging. Whereas longevity, on the contrast, or by contrast, is really focused on what are these fundamental biological causes of aging, and what can we do to increase ideally both our health span and our lifespan. So for us to live longer lives and healthier lives in the process. And if we do this in the right way, we're actually slowing down the aging process altogether. And so that's something we can talk about in terms of the things I've integrated into my lifestyle, and then different biological age clock results that I've gotten as a result of these interventions. But that's ultimately the fundamental difference, like hiding the sides of aging, or addressing aging from a very simplistic perspective of the oxidative damage side, or really actually impacting our health span and lifespan by looking holistically at what actually causes us to age.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like, you basically just described the difference between, conventional medicine and, functional medicine, right? Right there, anti-aging, longevity. Well, speaking of which, I know you mentioned that with some of these interventions and like kind of, healing modalities, like you were able to, I know I was reading about you, that you were able to reduce your biological age by about 13.6 years, or that's equivalent to like 37%. Can you share a little bit about like, what did that look like for you?
Sure. So first, to clarify, what do we actually mean by slowing down aging? And it's not super simple. So I'll provide your listeners with a little bit of the nuance behind what these numbers actually mean. So there are different ways that people try to measure their quote unquote biological age. And oftentimes biological age can be associated with an individual organ and its function or its functioning, its ability to function, or a whole body biological age is going to compare you to other people, essentially people, average people of a different chronological age, if that makes sense. So if I'm chronologically 40 and my biological age for my whole body comes out as 27, that means, according to at least certain metrics, I am that of an average 27-year-old rather than an average 40-year-old. And what are those metrics? Well, in the best biological age clocks, and there are many that are not particularly good, but for the best ones, they're looking at morbidity risk. So this is the risk that you come down with a chronic illness like cancer or heart disease or diabetes and so on. Mortality risk, so death from some specific disease, and then quality of life metrics. So this is, your gait speed, your grip strength, your ability to stand up without assistance, and all of these things that impact how well we function on our own. And so there are different ways to try to estimate this or calculate biological age. And the most well-researched and the most advanced way to do it as of today is what's called epigenetic testing. So it's a very complex term, but I'll make it simple. So your epigenome is a layer that sits on top of your genes. And so we all have our genes. They're hard-coded. This is what our parents have given to us. And the epigenome, on the other hand, is something that can change. It's essentially which genes are turned on and off. So if you think of your genes as being like a piano, your epigenome is which keys are being played, what music is being played on that piano. And as you age, you might start with a perfect Tchaikovsky song when you're young, and then by the time you're getting older, you start missing some keys, the rhythm is off a little bit, you hit the wrong key. And that's what's actually happening within our bodies, in our cells, and by extension, our organs. And so these epigenetic tests are able to detect these changes, and they're correlated, at least for many genes, they're correlated with your age and by extension, your biological age or your risk of morbidity, mortality, and your quality of life standards. And so based on that, we can essentially determine if you are that of again, I'm 40 years old, if I'm that of a 40-year-old or a 45-year-old or a 35-year-old or potentially even younger. So that's essentially what I mean when I say that I have a lower biological age. Now, when it comes to these algorithms, a lot of it's being done in academia. There's also some companies producing their own black box algorithms that they don't reveal to the public how they work. But the academic algorithms are open source for everyone to be able to see how they work. And then other scientists can scrutinize them, and we can actually see how effective they actually are. And for me, I've tested with about a dozen different epigenetic clocks. I've also tested with other types of biological age markers, things like metabolomic clocks, VO2 max for my maximum oxygen consumption when I exercise, and a handful of others. And they all average out to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 12 to 16, 17 years younger than I actually am chronologically. So that's how it all works. I'm happy to tell you like what specifically I do in my lifestyle and so on if you care to, but it's a very complex topic. We could probably spend the whole episode just talking about biological age and the clocks. So
yeah. Well, one of the things I'm just curious about though is like, okay, so the epigenetic clock, like, so I know you mentioned the different metrics, but is it a combination? Like, so for instance, at your company, NOVOS, you have a NOVOS age, and it has an epigenetic clock. I mean, that's what the product is, correct? Is that, yeah. And so like, is it a series of like blood tests, like saliva tests and like questionnaires, or how do they even like get the results for the metrics?
yeah, great question. So there are companies out there that offer epigenetic clocks, and like I mentioned, they're typically using black box algorithms they've invented themselves, but have not been independently verified. And then they use saliva, typically. What we're using is a blood sample. So you prick the end of your finger, and then you smear it on an index card. About the size of a quarter is the amount of blood that you would need on an index card. So very little. And then you mail it in. And the tests that we use, NOVOS Age actually has 3 different outputs, but the primary one to focus on is called the Dunedin Pace Clock. And this is not an in-house algorithm. This is actually produced by researchers at Columbia and Duke universities. It's considered to be the most accurate and precise of the clocks out there, according to objective statistical measures of how accurate and precise they are. And it tells you, actually, rather than a biological age, your current pace of aging. So if your score is a 1, it means that every 1 chronological year, you're aging 1 year biologically. If you get a 1.1, it means you're aging 10% faster than the average person. And if you get a 0.69 like I did, it implies that you're aging 31% slower than the average person. And I'm not the only one, by the way, who's getting results like that. We have multiple customers who have been in the press, Fortune magazine and Business Insider and others, for achieving results 0.65, 0.64, for slowing down their biological pace of aging by approximately 1/3. So it is possible. And specifically to your question, once the lab receives your blood sample, they are sequencing your genes and looking at the methylation patterns. So methylation is how your epigenome expresses itself. So if you methylate a gene, more often than not, that actually means that you're turning off that gene. And when you demethylate a gene, you're turning that gene on. And so by looking at the methylation patterns, we can see, and it's not on-off switches, it's actually a little more complex. It's like a dimmer switch, but we can actually see the degree to which genes are turned on and off. And then by extension, we can then tell you how fast or slow you're aging. Now, just to wrap up, NOVOS Age, we have 2 other outputs. The second one is a biological age. So the first is your pace of aging. The second is a biological age. But we let customers know that this is less accurate and precise than the pace of aging. So just take that with a grain of salt relative to the first result. And then the third is your telomere length. So your telomeres are the protective end caps of your chromosomes that protect your DNA. And they get shorter as you age, and they get shorter with each cellular division. So why would you have a lot of cellular division? Because you're living a very unhealthy life, so your cells are damaged and your body needs to produce new versions. So seeing how fast or slow your telomeres are getting shorter is actually an indicator of health span and lifespan as well. So this is a full package that you get with NOVOS Age.
Well, you mentioned that there are people that, you work with that are slowing their aging down by, 1/3. I'm curious, like, how much of that is related to lifestyle versus their genetics? Like, are these just people that have awesome genes and that's just, are these people living in the blue zones? Like, what are these people doing?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So studies have found that genetics accounts for anywhere between 10 and 30% of our lifespan and health span, our longevity. So that's actually much lower, much smaller than most people guess. A lot of people guess that the nature-nurture debate, 50-50, like probably half genes, half lifestyle. But no, it's actually predominantly, a large majority is lifestyle. So then back to your specific question, like, who are these people? What are they doing? They are living healthy lives. They're eating, a lot of vegetables in their diet. They're exercising typically daily. But I also want to emphasize these people aren't living crazy lifestyles. They're living very easy to achieve lifestyles. For example, if your audience looks up Julie Gibson Clark, she recently did a podcast interview with a health influencer named Ben Greenfield. She spends an hour talking to Ben about her lifestyle. And it's very achievable. It's nothing extreme. And what I could also add is that her results prior to taking NOVOS were pretty good. But then when she introduced supplements that we have created and patented, she was actually able to slow down her aging even more. Even though Julie specifically was going through a very stressful, traumatic period of her life, and she wasn't as strict with her lifestyle as she normally would be, she took our product and somehow she still achieved a better result, which was really exciting for us to learn that she was able to do that.
Well, I definitely wanted to talk about the products that she was taking that contributed to this, but I'm just curious too, because there's so much now, especially in the health and wellness space, that really the research is showing that like zero amounts of alcohol are beneficial for longevity in our life. I'm curious, are you noticing that, or is the research showing that a lot of these people who are really slowing down their biological age, do they drink alcohol?
I would say for the most part, people probably are not
Yeah.
drinking the alcohol. So when it comes to like the question of does alcohol have any benefits or not, uh, there were studies that not too long ago, just a few years ago, were saying that a little bit of alcohol, like 1 to 2 glasses, depending on if you're a larger male or a smaller female, like that's where that range comes in, uh, could potentially have a beneficial effect on cardiovascular outcomes and mortality risk and so on. But that's since been disproven. There was a very large statistical analysis of all of that data, and they essentially found that any amount of alcohol would actually increase your risk. Where there was the confusion was that there were some people who were having just a little bit of alcohol and they were living healthier, longer lives compared to those having no alcohol. But what they had to tease out in the study was that those having no alcohol were oftentimes having no alcohol because they had a medical condition already, or maybe they were former alcoholics or other reasons. And compared to those who were having 1 or 2 drinks, who oftentimes were quite active people, physically active, and by comparison, those people were just overall healthier as it was. So it wasn't the alcohol that was making them healthier. It was just
Yeah.
that they were already healthier and happened to only have 1 or 2 drinks. Now, there's still controversy. Like there's some that will argue that a very, very small amount of alcohol can still be good. But now we're talking about like a third or half a glass. And at that point, it's such a small quantity. It's not what most people think of when they're thinking of having a glass of alcohol.
Right. And like, I'm like, who drinks a third of a glass of alcohol? I mean, that's, that, right. That's just really interesting because I think there's so much awareness now that's being, brought up around alcohol. Well, I'm curious, like, what is the goal though, as we talk about, like, before we get into like the supplements and stuff, because I'm dying to know about this too, like, as far as what's the goal, like, is the goal like, oh, you just want to be as young as possible biologically? Or is it like, there's definitely, okay, if you're 40, you kind of tap out at like, you don't even try to get to 25. You could take all the supplements in the world, but you're never going to be a 20-year-old. Or are you guys seeing there's really no kind of cap on that gap, if that makes sense?
Yeah, well, so I think just a very quick personal story will make all of this make more sense as to like why I'm doing what I'm doing and then
Yeah.
bring it back to everyone else. So when I was a teenager, I was diagnosed with a brain tumor. And this was despite being very physically active and exercising at the gym almost every day from a young age and eating a healthy diet. And so having that experience really transformed my thinking about health and life in general and what I wanted to get out of it. But also I wanted to avoid a chronic illness at all costs. I didn't want to be diagnosed with heart disease or cancer and so on, and contemplating whether I would wake up the next day or not. And so that planted a seed for me from a very early age to be interested in health, not simply for the superficial sides of it, to be attractive and in good shape and so on, but to actually avoid disease and to live as healthy as possible for as long as possible. Now, the real interest in longevity, I'm not talking about necessarily for consumers, but for scientists and researchers, is because aging is the number one risk factor for practically every chronic disease. So whether it be Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's, cancer, heart disease, diabetes, glaucoma, you go through the list, the number one risk factor is age. Even more so than cigarette smoke causes lung cancer, age is actually multiple times more significant of a contributor to lung cancer than cigarette smoke is. So with that in mind, researchers who have felt frustrated with the very, very slow lack of progress for cancer therapies and trying to cure cancer and cardiovascular disease and dementia and Alzheimer's, the question then became, well, if aging is the common denominator, what causes aging in the first place? And are there things we can do to try to slow down those processes? And that's where the hallmarks or the mechanisms of aging come in, where I mentioned them earlier, that there are a dozen of them and only one of them relates to the oxidative damage that causes DNA damage. But there are 11 others, two of which we've also mentioned already. So dysregulated epigenome, that is another biological cause of aging, and telomere shortening is another. So we've already mentioned 3 out of the 12. So scientists are now looking at ways that we can actually slow down these changes in the epigenome, slow down the attrition of the telomeres, all of these different mechanisms, which all interact with each other, by the way. They all kind of, if one has a negative outcome, the others are then going to have a ripple effect of a negative outcome as well. So they feed off of each other, and it becomes an exponential rise in the risk of disease and death as we get older. Every decade, we see that rise going up very significantly. So that's really the interest in all of this. Now, practically speaking, why is somebody actually going to do this? Well, we find that a handful of people are interested in longevity for the sake of avoiding disease and trying to live as long as possible. There's also a cohort of people who are really interested in trying to look as young as they possibly can for as long as they can. And then a whole other cohort of people are looking to be like the youngest version of themselves physically and mentally for as long as they possibly can. The good thing is that if you do this right, you get all of those benefits from living a longevity-centric lifestyle.
Well, so then how do you do it right? And how is NOVOS helping people to do it right?
Great question. So I think of it as a pie. There's multiple pieces to that pie. And, one of those critical components everyone knows is diet. So the foods you eat and even the timing of that food, if you're eating late at night versus early in the morning, for example, can have different metabolic effects on us. Our activity levels. For most people, that means being more physically active. But for some people, it actually means being a little bit less physically active. People who push themselves too hard and they're actually causing excess inflammation in their bodies. They're not recovering enough. That could actually accelerate the aging process as well. Sleep, and to that point of recovery, having very high quality of sleep and the adequate quantity of sleep as well. Stress management is very important. Social connections have been found to have an impact on disease risk and lifespan. Even something like optimism, which is related somewhat to stress management, but just overall psychology can have an impact on it. And then supplementation as well, which is by no means would I say that is the single most important factor. It is not, but that's where NOVOS specializes, is in trying to help people where they might have a deficiency somewhere else in their lifestyle, or for those who are the overachievers trying to do everything they possibly can. That's where supplementation can also play a role.
Well, how would you know? Like, because I definitely will fall into the overachiever, right? Like that definitely for me. I'm like, okay, I know I'm moving my body, I'm eating right, I'm prioritizing sleep, but I'm like, I can. That's where I think that I could use the supplements, and so I want to talk to that person as well. But then for the person who feels like maybe they are lacking in some of these other areas, first of all, how does somebody know, like, is the process with like the supplements, do you recommend that someone gets like a blood test first, or like, how does somebody know? And I think this is the case for all supplements, right? Like sometimes we could just like take a bunch of supplements and who knows if we really need it, right? And so maybe for somebody who's maybe doesn't know if they're missing something of all the other pieces of the pie, how do you advise, customers and clients when they're maybe in that position?
Yeah, so let's, before we even get to the supplements, let's just start with the foundations of health. What are the things that you can do to significantly improve your health? We have a survey on our website, novoslabs.com, where you can fill it out and you can get personalized longevity recommendations. But even better than that, we have a mobile app that we're in the process of launching just next week. It's on Android and iOS. It's called NOVOS Life. It's 100% free, and all of the features are free as well. And one of those features is longevity recommendations. So it will look at your lifestyle and say, these are the areas that you need the most help, and these are the areas that you need a little bit less help. And then within those, we can set daily actions for you. And these are very small, achievable steps that you can take to then try to achieve those recommendations. And if you don't like a specific recommendation, you could swap it out for a different one. But the point is to try to get people to take very small steps one day at a time to start to then cultivate a new lifestyle for themselves that is more aligned with health, longer health span and lifespan. So then when it comes specifically to supplements, I think it's important to distinguish between general health supplements and then specialty supplements. General health supplements are the things that you're going to find the government has an RDA for, right? So the B vitamins, vitamin A, C, D, E, K, the minerals like magnesium and potassium and zinc, copper, and so on. So these are things that have been shown to be biologically essential for our health. And then when you have specialty supplements, there's different categories. You've got weight loss supplements and pre-workout supplements, post-workout supplements. Longevity supplements is a category of its own that Novos is really at the lead of. And so we can talk about those two separately. So if we start just with general health supplements, yes, there are different things you can do. You could do genetic analysis and see which genetic polymorphisms you have. That's more advanced than most people want to do. You could also do blood tests to see if you have any deficiencies in a specific nutrient, but it's not a perfect test. For example, you might have very high levels of B12 in your blood, but it's not making its way into the cell. And the blood test isn't going to tell you that detail. You're just going to see the numbers of high B12 and assume you have more than enough. Meanwhile, you're missing a cofactor to help you get that B12 into the cell. So generally speaking, we think that the simplest way to really handle this is to just get a high quality, moderately dosed multivitamin that includes vitamin D, vitamin K, and then of course consider other things like fish oils. But the reason for this is that there's a study called NHANES. It runs every year, and it looks at tens of thousands of people and their diets, the foods that they're consuming. And it's been found, and I write about this on my personal blog called slowmyage.com, that there is a very, very high percentage of the population with at least one and typically multiple nutrient inadequacies. So it's different than a deficiency, where a deficiency is going to be defined by the government as so low of an intake of a nutrient, you're going to have a disease very short, in short order, like scurvy or something, right? But an inadequacy is where you're getting a dosage that is lower, lower than ideal, such that over time it can actually lead to disease or shortened lifespan. It could take decades before you get there. And the most prevalent inadequacy, I believe, is potassium, but right up there is magnesium and choline and vitamin D and vitamin K. And so as healthy as you eat, it's almost impossible to get adequate dosages of these. So that's why we recommend just a low, moderately dosed multivitamin just to put on top of your already healthy diet. And that can cover all bases when it comes to the general health. And then, of course, we could talk about longevity supplements, but that's a different category.
No, I'm here for that. That's what I want to talk about for sure. No, but I love that you gave also just kind of the more general ones, because there is a lot of confusion with supplements. And so I think, there can also be a lot of confusion with these specialty ones too. So yeah, I would love to know, now dive into the difference with the longevity ones.
Sure. And just very quickly, I'm sure your audience is curious, what's a high quality multivitamin? Just a couple that come to mind. One is Life Extension brand, has a 2 per day. It's only like $10, $12 a month. And then Pure Encapsulations has one that's a little bit more expensive, about $30, $35. And the one I personally take is called ONE. So it's the Pure Encapsulations ONE, or one multivitamin. Yep. So when it comes to longevity supplements, these are, there's a lot of companies entering the space trying to claim that they're longevity supplements, but they don't really have the science to back them up. They will position themselves as being scientific and say backed by science. But there's a big distinction between how Novos is handling things and then those who are kind of trying to follow in our footsteps are handling things. So first, the way that we handle things, we've brought on some of the world's most renowned longevity scientists as advisors and as team members here at Novos. So we're talking about people out of Harvard Medical School like Dr. George Church, who invented genome sequencing back in the 1980s, and he is a tenured professor at both Harvard and MIT. Matt Kaberlein, who's famous for his work with the Dog Aging Project and the prescription drug rapamycin to slow down the aging of dogs, and so on. So we've got 8 or 9 of these people on our team. And together, we review the scientific literature and then put together some hypothetical approaches to a formulation, and ultimately add ingredients and remove ingredients based on different arguments that scientists are making. And then eventually we came up with our flagship product. This is years ago now, called NOVOS Core. This is what we filed for patents with, and it's based on more than 400 scientific studies for the specific ingredients that we included. But we didn't stop there. That's where most companies, that's already more than most companies would do. But anyone who tries to do that, that's where they typically stop. What we've done in addition to that is scientific research at academic labs across the world, looking at the different hallmarks of aging that we've begun talking about. For example, DNA damage, cellular senescence, which is cells that turn into a zombie-like state. This process called oxytosis ferroptosis, which leads to inflammation and Alzheimer's, dementia, and certain forms of cancer, and others. But we've looked at all of this at labs, and we found that our formula is able to have very significant, pronounced positive effects on each of these. We've also shown in a case study with people that 73% of the participants aged 39 to 76, half male, half female, were able to slow down their biological pace of aging using the Dunedin pace clock that we talked about before, but all administered independently from us. We never touched any of the samples and so on. It was administered by a third party. We were able to slow down their pace of aging by a significant amount, on average, by 1 month per year. So imagine having 1 extra month of life per year. That is what it implies, the potential of. And 0% of people accelerated their pace of aging when taking the formula. So you would expect some people from lifestyle stressors may have sped up their aging, but nobody did. So accumulating evidence like that, and we're not done. We're continuing to do studies. But so far, if you go to novoslabs.com/evidence, you'll see all of this evidence is accumulating, both anecdotes of people slowing their pace of aging to scientific studies like I'm referring to. So I can talk about the ingredients that we use in our formula or the approach, but that's the proof that what we're doing is quite unique and different from anything else that's existed before this.
Yeah, even with just more general supplements, I mean, we know that it is like the most dysregulated, industry, one of the most dysregulated industries in the US. And so I love, though, that you guys are really taking it to that next level to test and to really dive into the research and go above and beyond. And I think that that's such a hallmark of what consumers should look for when considering these different supplements. Because you're right, like I think sometimes it can feel like the market is flooded. So I that was my next question, though, is like in that NOVOS Core, I know that there are like 12. It's a blend of 12 ingredients. What are some of those ingredients?
Yeah, so our formula is the very first formula to address all 12 of the biological root causes of aging, the 12 mechanisms that we keep referring to. So it was an idea that I had when I was starting the company, and we ultimately were the very first to do it, and we're the most validated and proven to have that effect. And so some of the ingredients that we use, one is calcium alpha ketoglutarate. Our cells have alpha ketoglutarate in them, but the levels decline as we age. To that point, another ingredient that is within our bodies but declines with age significantly, starting at about 20 years old, is hyaluronic acid. Now, a lot of people might be familiar with hyaluronic acid for topical use in skin creams, for example, but it's actually in our bodies, moisturizing and hydrating our joints, hydrating our skin and making it look more plump. And we included this ingredient for 2 reasons. One, believe it or not, the main reason is because it contains a molecule called acetylglucosamine that has been shown in animal studies to be able to extend lifespan. So that was the primary reason to include it. But the nice to have benefit is that people who consume hyaluronic acid actually have favorable effects on their skin. After a few weeks, they can see a better complexion, more hydration in their skin. So very fine lines and wrinkles might actually look a little bit more plump from its consumption. Other ingredients, fisetin. This is an ingredient that's found naturally in strawberries, but we have a much higher dose. It would take about 100 strawberries a day to be able to get the dosage that we have in our formula. But this ingredient has been found to have favorable effects on senescent cells, on neurological health, and so on. A couple of others, I'll just list a few more off. Glycine is a component of collagen. It's a very powerful amino acid. Most people are deficient in it nowadays since we don't eat animal skin and cartilage and organ meat like we historically did. So we're deficient in it now. Ginger extract, it's very commonly known ginger, but it has a lot of really favorable effects on lifespan and health span. Specifically, an ingredient that has a lot of people questioning why we would have the ingredient, but it's actually a very interesting ingredient worth talking about, is a microdose of lithium. So most people associate lithium with either exploding batteries on airplanes or with prescription doses of lithium for disorders like bipolar. But we're talking about dosages 100 to 200 times higher than a microdose in the prescription context. The microdose is what we have evolved with in our food and water supply. So when we were consuming water straight from streams and wells, there is lithium in it, a high amount of lithium, because it leaches through stones into that water. But now with municipal water supplies, which are filtrated or bottled water, we're not getting that lithium anymore. And there have been studies that look at people that have higher levels of lithium from natural water supplies in their communities. And there are lower rates of depression, anxiety, rape, murder, like crazy psychological conditions are considerably reduced from people that have lithium in their water supply. Not to mention it has a favorable effect on the epigenome, has a favorable effect on neurological health overall. So it's got amazing properties to it. The key is that it's a microdose. We're talking about 1 single milligram, which is a very, very low dose.
So I'm curious because I know one of the other products, and I'm very familiar with NMN. I have to say that slow or I get tripped up. I'm curious, though, why is that like a separate product? As like, why wouldn't that be in like in the core product, right? Is that because I mean it's a huge longevity supplement. So I'm curious, why that wasn't and why there weren't just one together.
It's a great question. So there was actually two primary reasons why we didn't include it when we first created NOVOS Core, and we were considering merging them together. The first reason was that we didn't feel like there was nearly as much scientific evidence for NMN relative to the other ingredients in our formula. So NMN is kind of the new kid on the block. It's something that has become very popular. A scientist at Harvard, Dr. David Sinclair, really popularized it with some research he was doing, but he's not the only researcher looking at it. But he is a public figure, so he was able to get a lot of attention for it on podcasts like Joe Rogan and so on. And so it really took off. But compared to these other ingredients like microdose lithium and glycine and alpha-ketoglutarate, there just wasn't nearly as much research around it. So we didn't want to make our flagship product dependent on this single ingredient that we felt like more research needed to prove its efficacy in humans. It was showing promise in animals, but we wanted more research to evolve in it before potential inclusion. The second reason was that it would actually significantly increase the price of the NOVOS Core product. So we wanted to make the NOVOS Core as accessible for people as possible. And the formula as it is stands on its own, even without NMN. It has these really fantastic results in the studies that we run. So we wanted to make this as accessible as possible. And including NMN would have raised the price by another 20% or so. And we're already talking about a price point that's in the neighborhood of about $100 per month, about $3 per day. Though that price does come down if you commit to a year, we get the price down to $79. And we're also HSA, FSA eligible. So you can actually use tax-free dollars for it, which takes the price down another 30 to 40%. So in that sense, we're able to make it affordable for a lot more people, keeping the price point somewhere around $50 per month in that case, if you're using HSA dollars. But if we had the NMN, it would still be even more expensive than that.
Well, and what I really want the listeners to understand is there is a difference in quality in supplements. Yes, you can go on to like Amazon and get some NMN or whatever, but the quality of supplement is there is a huge difference between companies like Novos who are really, doing the third party testing, who are doing, the research and the studies and all of that, who are doing self regulation versus these companies. Because as we mentioned earlier, the supplementation world and at least the United States is so unregulated. You could be getting something on Amazon that says it's NMN. See how it trips me up? And it's coming from like China, and who knows really what's in there. So, I just want to really make sure the listeners understand like supplements and what you're putting in your body is not something to cheap out on. Like if you're serious about longevity, like pay the extra money. I mean, like it's worth it for sure.
Yeah, I can say as give your audience just a quick peek into what it's like running a business like this. We are constantly emailed by suppliers across the world, oftentimes in China, offering us very low prices on ingredients that we use in our formula. And there are many companies out there that will take advantage of that and then sell their products, like you said, on Amazon at very low costs. We don't do that because we only work with suppliers that we trust, that we've built a relationship with, that we've done a number of COAs on, which are certificates of analysis. So scientific labs that are measuring the ingredient and making sure it is what they say it is and that it has no toxins in it and so on. And even after that's done, we, as a company, take the finished product and we also run with a very well-regarded lab called Eurofins, additional analysis to make sure our products contain what they say they contain and that they don't have toxins in them. And of course, this then leads to a slightly higher price for both the ingredients and then the testing. But to your point, that way you're getting what you're paying for and you're not taking in something that, God forbid, was actually toxic to you, which would be so counter to what your goals are. But even going beyond all of that, I would say that our prices are still quite affordable. We did an analysis on our website where we tried to build the same stack as Novos Core on Amazon. And we looked at the lowest price for ingredients at least known brands. So it wasn't going to be an unknown brand that who knows what's in it. It's at least a known brand. And our prices were already, I believe, somewhere around 30% lower for the standard purchase. And then if you got the annual supply and then you applied the HSA, we're talking about in the neighborhood of about just over a third of the price, one third of the price of what it would cost you to buy it on Amazon. And on Amazon, you would have to get a dozen different pill bottles and they have different number of pills in them. So you're refilling them at different time increments. It's a mess. With Novos Core, I haven't shown it yet, but this is what Novos Core looks like. It's a daily sachet. It's a drink mix. You tear it open. It would otherwise take more than a dozen pills a day to consume this. And we have an orange flavor, which is naturally sweetened and has stevia in it, so no calories. Or for those who don't want any flavor, we have an unflavored version that it does have a little bit of an herbal taste if you put it in water. So we encourage people to put it into a smoothie or a juice or a yogurt, something with flavor, so it will mask that slight herbal hint to it. But this just makes it far more convenient. And ultimately, it actually is less expensive, even though we're testing everything the way that we are.
I love that because, and it's way more portable, right? Like when you travel, you just throw the packets in your thing. Like I know, like I've tried to go the route where you buy those, like I just call them, like my grandmother had those like pill things. You take these on Monday and I have like 75 pills in there. So I love that this is a powder. I love it because that was going to be one of my next questions was, okay, well, so with this, 12 ingredients, am I choking down 12 pills? But the answer is no, it is a powder. So yeah.
Yes.
I love that.
So, and we as a company, so the newest product that we've launched, I just opened this bag. This is called Novos Vital. So this product, whereas the Novos Core focuses on the 12 hallmarks of aging, this product focuses on specific organs that decline as we age. So that's specifically the eyes, brain, heart, liver, kidneys, gut, and muscle. And this has 7 ingredients in it. One of those ingredients that you might be very familiar with is raw apple cider vinegar. We've got a full dosage, unlike other brand names out there that are very popular that have very small dosages. This has the full dosage. And if you consume this with your meals, it can help with digestion, help to keep your blood glucose lower than it would otherwise rise to. And with that said, these are daily chews. So similar to a gummy, though a little bit less chewy. They don't get stuck in your teeth like a gummy would. And it's got a tropical mango flavor to it with a little bit of tartness from the apple cider vinegar. And you have 4 of them a day. You can have 2 with your lunch, 2 at dinner, spread them out however you'd like. And to that point, this has 7 ingredients. NOVOS Core has 12 ingredients. So you're getting 19 ingredients in these really convenient, enjoyable form factors. People tell us they crave the NOVOS Core. They crave the sweet fix that they get from the NOVOS Vital formula. So we want to habituate it, make it into something that people look forward to each day, and they build a habit around. Rather than coughing down 19 pills to get the equivalent of these 2 enjoyable products.
Yeah, because I got to tell you, as I'm getting older, my ability to choke down 75 is not awesome. Well, I know that there's other products that that you guys offer, and we're going to have definitely all of that in the show notes. But there's no so that listeners can check it out. But there's no way we could end this episode without talking about the facial age test. Okay. Cause I'm please share what this is. Cause I'm I could just look at myself in the mirror and guess about what age I look some days. So I'm curious, what is this facial age test you guys do?
Yeah. So we have this tool called Face Age. So if you search
Face
for it
Age, okay. Did I say that
facial,
wrong?
but
No.
it is for facial aging. So,
okay.
but it's called Face Age. That's the brand name for it. So you can search it on Google or go to novoslabs.com/face age. And it's powered by AI. It's been trained on millions of photographs, and it's able to tell you how young you look, essentially, for your whole face, but then also your eye age, so how young your eyes look. And then it also provides 5 other skin health markers. So, for example, your wrinkles, skin uniformity, skin inflammation, pore size, and one other that's escaping me at the moment. The test is completely free. You just take a selfie. If you're going to do it, you want to have really bright lighting, be well hydrated. Don't have overhead lighting where it can cast shadows under your eyes, right? So just be very conscientious of the lighting conditions and how you're actually looking in that selfie. And then it'll give you the output via email. And then, of course, we don't leave you hanging if you have some poor scores, which, believe me, it's a very objective test. This isn't like your best friend telling you that you look great. This is super, super objective. So everyone gets some score that they're just not as happy with. For example, with me, with pore size and maybe skin redness or something being in the Florida sun. We provide recommendations. So there are articles that accompany each one of those scores that can then tell you, well, what is the next step you can take to try to improve that specific score. And the vast majority of those recommendations are actually free things that you can integrate into your lifestyle without having to spend big bucks on.
I love that. I love you guys also have just so many awesome, just free tools for consumers. The app, by the time this airs, that app will be out, measuring the biological age. And then also this face one. That's awesome. Well, Chris, thank you so much for being here today. I mean, I told you earlier, I love these conversations. I love teaching just people kind of and clarifying some of these hot topics that seem to be popping up all over social media, all over the news. And sometimes it can just be really hard to wade through what it's all about. So thank you for just sharing your knowledge and your experience with the listeners today.
Of course. And if I can just briefly mention, we have a blog on our website, a couple of 100 articles written by MDs and PhDs. So to your point, for people trying to wade through all of the noise and get to the truth, we have the scientific truth on our website completely for free. We provide all of these tools for free because we're a public benefit corporation. So it's my intention to help as many people as possible. Our vision is to add more than 1 billion years of healthy life to humanity. And we're not going to do it simply by selling our formulas. It's going to be done by providing free tools to the masses.
Awesome. And where can the listeners connect and find your products and connect with you guys on social?
So for NOVOS, it's novoslabs.com. We're also on all of the social networks as NOVOS Labs. And then I personally have a blog called slowmyage.com. And then I'm on TikTok X, and Instagram as Slow My Age.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Chris, thanks again for being here. We appreciate you.
Of course, thanks for having me.
Thank you.